My world completely shattered when I saw who was sitting beside my son in that car and heard the conversation they were having about me. My name is Margaret. I'm 64 years old, and I never could have imagined I would discover the most ruthless and cold-hearted scheme orchestrated by my own family. Hey guys, before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join this community, because I don't want you missing out on the next videos that drop. Now back to the story. It all started that Tuesday afternoon when I decided to surprise Daniel, my only son. I had baked his favorite apple pie and wanted to bring it to his office to make his day brighter. When I arrived at the parking garage, I spotted his blue Honda parked in a corner space. A playful idea crossed my mind that made me grin like a schoolgirl. I would hide in the back seat to surprise him when he returned. I quietly slipped into the unlocked car and crouched behind the front seats. My heart raced with anticipation, imagining the expression on his face when I appeared with the apple pie he had adored since childhood. I waited there, holding my breath, listening to every sound echoing through the garage. After what felt like forever, I heard footsteps approaching. The car doors opened and Daniel slid into the driver's seat, but then someone else settled into the passenger seat. It was a woman. Initially, I assumed it might be a colleague until I heard her voice and immediately recognized it as Nicole, his wife. My first instinct was warmth. How lovely that they had decided to leave work together. But my smile vanished as they began speaking. The first words that escaped Nicole's lips were like ice picks to my heart. "Are you absolutely certain no one will become suspicious when it happens?" she asked in a frigid tone I had never heard before. "Nicole, we've discussed this countless times. The plan is flawless. Mom will have a completely natural, totally believable accident. No one will question it when a woman her age falls down the stairs in her old house," Daniel responded in a voice that froze my blood. The air seemed to drain from my lungs. I couldn't be hearing what I thought I was hearing. My son, my only son, the boy I had raised alone after his father passed when he was just 7 years old, was plotting to kill me. And after the funeral, when everything settles down, we can sell that decrepit house and move into the neighborhood we've always wanted. With the $180,000 that property is worth, plus the savings she has stashed away, we can live the way we've always dreamed, Nicole continued, with twisted excitement in her voice. My mind went blank. That house she called decrepit was the place where I had sacrificed everything to give Daniel the best life possible. Every room held memories of sleepless nights when he was ill, of birthdays celebrated with little money but abundant love, of afternoons working on homework together at the dining room table. "Marcus and Linda are cooperating, right?" Daniel asked. Hearing those names, my heart shattered even further. Marcus was my younger brother, and Linda, his wife, were also part of this evil conspiracy. "Of course they are. Your uncle is desperate for the money ever since he got laid off, and Linda keeps reminding me that your mother has always been very tight-fisted with them. She says it's time for the family to get what they're owed," Nicole replied with disdain. Tight-fisted. That word reverberated in my mind like a painful echo. I had worked as a housekeeper since I was 19 to support my son. I had even pawned my grandmother's jewelry to pay for his university fees. I never bought myself new clothes so he could have everything he needed. "The life insurance will help too. That's another $120,000 we'll collect without any problems," Daniel added. In that moment, I knew there was nothing left of the gentle boy I had raised. My tears began falling silently as I remained crouched, praying they wouldn't discover me. My body trembled not only with terror but with a grief so deep I felt like I might split apart. The conversation continued for several more minutes, outlining every detail of my planned death. They had considered everything: the precise timing, how to make it appear accidental, even how they would perform at the funeral to seem devastated. When they finally exited the car and walked away as if nothing had happened, I waited another 15 minutes before daring to move. I emerged from that car a completely transformed woman from the one who had entered. The loving, trusting mother had perished in that back seat. I walked toward my old Toyota on unsteady legs, knowing I had to make a decision that would alter everything forever. I drove home in complete shock with tears clouding my vision and my heart broken into countless fragments. I couldn't believe what I had heard. My own son, the purpose of my existence, wanted to murder me for money, but to fully comprehend this betrayal, I need to explain how we arrived here, because my story with Daniel began 36 years ago when he was born amid complete destitution. His father, William, died in a workplace accident when Daniel was just 7 years old. He left us with no insurance, no savings, nothing except a small, ancient house we had purchased with tremendous struggle. Overnight, I became a single mother with a child to support and no formal education beyond high school. I started working as a cleaner at age 21. I woke every day at 5 a.m., made breakfast for Daniel, dropped him at school, then drove across the city cleaning offices, homes, apartments, whatever was necessary to bring money home. My hands became raw from harsh chemicals. My back ached from carrying heavy equipment, but I never complained. Daniel was a brilliant child, always at the top of his class. His teachers constantly told me he had a promising future ahead, that I had to ensure he attended university. Those words became my life's purpose. Every dollar I earned, I saved devotedly for his education. When he turned 16, he needed a laptop for his school assignments. All the other mothers could easily purchase them for their children. But for me, it represented 4 months of wages. I sold my wedding ring, the only precious keepsake I had from William, to buy him that laptop. Daniel never knew about the sacrifice I made, and I never mentioned it because I didn't want him to feel burdened. During his final year of high school, private universities began sending us information about their pre-law programs. Daniel had decided he wanted to become a lawyer, and I was prepared to do anything to make that dream reality. The tuition was $25,000 annually, a fortune for a woman like me. I approached my brother Marcus to ask for assistance. He had a stable job at a financial firm and lived comfortably with Linda. I explained the situation to him. I pleaded with him to lend me even part of the money, promising to repay it with interest. His response was harsh and blunt. "Margaret, I can't risk my savings on your son's unrealistic dreams. He should find work and abandon those fantasies of becoming a professional." Those words wounded me deeply, but they didn't deter me. I took a second job cleaning a dental office at night. I worked from 5 a.m. until midnight, 7 days a week. My body was exhausted, but my resolve was unshakable. I also began selling homemade baked goods on weekends. I prepared cookies, muffins, pies, anything that could generate additional income size. Daniel helped me occasionally, but I preferred he concentrate on his studies. "Your job is to study, son. Leave everything else to me," I always told him. I finally managed to save the money for his first year of university. The day I accompanied him to register, I wept tears of joy seeing his name on the official documents. My son was going to be a lawyer. All my sacrifice had been worthwhile. The university years were the most challenging of my life. I worked up to 16 hours daily to keep the payments current. There were months when I barely had money for food, but I always ensured Daniel had everything he required. Textbooks, supplies, money for social activities. I didn't want him to feel different from his classmates who came from affluent families. During his 3rd year, Daniel began dating Nicole, a classmate from a very prosperous family. Her father owned multiple businesses, and she was accustomed to a lavish lifestyle I couldn't even imagine. Initially, I worried that Daniel would feel inadequate, but he seemed happy and in love. Nicole was always polite with me, but from our first meeting, I sensed a coldness in her manner. When she visited my house, she surveyed everything with critical eyes. The worn furniture, the walls that needed fresh paint, the tiny kitchen where I prepared modest meals. She never commented directly, but her expression spoke volumes. After graduation, Daniel secured a position at a renowned law firm. His first paycheck exceeded what I earned in 4 months. I felt proud but also relieved, thinking I could finally rest somewhat after so many years of relentless work. He married Nicole in an elegant ceremony that consumed my remaining savings. She had insisted on a wedding befitting their social status, and despite the expense leaving me penniless, I wanted my son to be happy. During the reception, I overheard some guests discussing the groom's humble mother with obvious contempt, but I tried to ignore it. After the wedding, Daniel's visits became infrequent. Nicole always had excuses: social obligations, business trips, family gatherings with her parents. When they did visit, the conversation revolved around their new life, the luxury apartment they had rented, the expensive restaurants where they dined, the plans to relocate to an even grander house. I continued working, but now only part-time. At 62 years old, my body could no longer withstand the punishing hours of before. I had managed to save approximately $60,000 over the years, money I kept religiously for emergencies or to help Daniel if he ever needed it. My relationship with my brother Marcus also deteriorated over time. After Daniel graduated and found employment, Marcus started making snide remarks about how some people are fortunate with their successful children. Linda was even worse, constantly implying that I had been selfish for investing so much in Daniel's education instead of helping the extended family. What hurt me most was witnessing how Daniel was beginning to change. His values, his manner of speaking, even his wardrobe became different. Sometimes when he spoke to me, I detected a patronizing tone that broke my heart. It was as if he was embarrassed by his humble origins. 6 months ago, Daniel and Nicole started discussing purchasing a house in an exclusive part of the city. The properties there cost over $600,000, an amount that was incomprehensible to me. When I asked how they planned to afford it, he responded vaguely about investments and business opportunities. I also noticed that conversations about money became more frequent during their visits. Subtle questions about my house's value, about my savings, about whether I had life insurance. At the time, I thought it was filial concern, that he wanted to ensure I was financially secure. Now, sitting in my kitchen after hearing that horrific conversation in the car, all the puzzle pieces began fitting together. The changes in his personality, the questions about money, Nicole's influence, the complicity of Marcus and Linda, it had all been part of a sinister plan that had been developing for months. My son, for whom I had sacrificed my entire life, wanted to kill me to inherit my assets and collect my life insurance. The irony was cruel, and the money they wanted to murder me for had been earned for the sole purpose of giving him the best life possible. I couldn't sleep a single minute that night. I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the enormity of what I had discovered. My mind wouldn't stop replaying every word of that diabolical conversation. Over and over, I heard Nicole's cold voice discussing my death as if it were a business deal, and my son's voice, my own son, agreeing to the details of my murder. At sunrise, I rose with a determination I didn't know I possessed. If they wanted to play ruthlessly, I could too. But first, I needed to fully understand what I had become to them. I decided to do something I had never done before: spy on my own family. Over the following days, I began observing Daniel and Nicole's behavior patterns. I parked discreetly near their apartment in the mornings, followed them from a distance when they went out, and paid careful attention to every detail of their conversations when they visited me. What I discovered horrified me even more. Their lifestyle was completely unsustainable with their income. Daniel earned a decent salary as a lawyer, about $7,500 monthly, but Nicole had quit working after the wedding, and their expenses were excessive. They dined at restaurants costing over $300 per meal. Nicole purchased designer handbags worth thousands, and they had rented an apartment with monthly rent of $4,200. I also discovered they had accumulated enormous debts. I accidentally overheard a phone call where Daniel was arguing with someone from the bank about overdue credit card payments. They owed more than $75,000 in loans and cards, and the interest was accumulating rapidly. The financial pressure had driven them to desperation, and I represented their only escape. My house, which they had valued at $180,000, my life insurance policy of $120,000, and my savings of $60,000 totaled exactly what they needed to solve their financial crisis and purchase their dream house. But the most devastating discovery was that my brother Marcus was not only involved, he had been the one who originally proposed the idea. One afternoon, while cleaning the office where Linda worked, I overheard a phone conversation that stole my breath. "Margaret has always been so stingy with her money," Linda was saying to someone on the phone. "Marcus is right. It's time for the family to get what we deserve. That selfish old woman is going to die eventually anyway. Why wait? We need that money too. Marcus lost his job 4 months ago, and we haven't been able to make the mortgage payments." I stood frozen behind her office door. My brother had lost his job and hadn't told me anything. Instead of asking me for help as family should, he had decided it was better to kill me for the money. That same evening, I decided to confront Marcus directly. I went to his house unannounced, something I never did, and knocked on the door with my heart pounding violently. When he opened it, his face showed surprise and a flicker of what appeared to be guilt. "Margaret, what are you doing here so late?" he asked without inviting me inside. "Marcus, I need to speak with you. May I come in?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We entered the living room where Linda was watching television. She greeted me coldly, as she always had in recent years. I sat on the couch and decided to get straight to the point. "Marcus, is it true you lost your job?" I asked, watching his reaction carefully. His face flushed red, and Linda immediately switched off the television. "How did you find out?" he asked defensively. "It doesn't matter how I discovered it. What matters is that you're my brother and you didn't tell me anything." "Why didn't you ask me for help?" Marcus and Linda exchanged glances that confirmed my worst suspicions. There was silent communication between them, as if they had rehearsed this conversation. "Margaret, you've always had your own problems. We didn't want to burden you," Linda replied with a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Linda, I'm his sister. If Marcus needed help, I would be willing to assist him. I have some savings." At that moment, I saw something terrible in my brother's eyes. It wasn't gratitude or relief, but resentment. "Some savings?" he asked sarcastically. "Margaret, we all know you have much more than just some savings. You've been hoarding money for years while the rest of the family struggled." His words struck me like physical blows. "Marcus, I earned that money working 16 hours a day to give my son an education. I didn't hoard it. I sacrificed everything for him." "Exactly," Linda interrupted with venom in her voice. "Everything for Daniel. You never considered helping your own brother. When he needed money for trade school, you told him no. But for your precious Prince Daniel, there was always money." The conversation was becoming hostile, and I could feel the animosity building in the room. It was as if years of accumulated resentment were surfacing. "You don't understand," I tried to explain. "I wanted Daniel to have opportunities we never had. I wanted to break the cycle of poverty in our family." "And what about breaking the cycle of favoritism?" Marcus shouted, standing up. "What about thinking of your brother who also needs help? It's always been the same, Margaret. Since we were children, you were Mom and Dad's favorite, and now you act like you're superior to us." These accusations were completely false, but I realized they had constructed a narrative to justify their resentment. In their version of events, I was the selfish, privileged sister, while they were the misunderstood victims. "If you needed money so desperately, why didn't you ask me directly?" I persisted, though I already knew the answer. Linda laughed bitterly. "So you could give us handouts like we were beggars? So you could make us feel inferior like you always have?" "I have never tried to make you feel inferior." "Oh no," Marcus yelled. "What about when you bought a house and we were still renting? What about when Daniel graduated from university and our children barely finished high school? What about when you boast about your savings while we struggled to pay bills?" Every accusation was more unfair than the last. I had worked like a slave for everything I had. I hadn't inherited anything. I hadn't been lucky. I had earned every dollar through sweat and sacrifice. But to them, my modest success was a personal insult. "Marcus, if you need money, I can lend you $15,000 right now," I offered desperately, trying to find a peaceful solution. $15,000, Linda scoffed. "Margaret, we know exactly how much money you have. The house is worth $1,000. You have $60,000 in savings, and your life insurance is worth $120,000, and you offer us $15,000 like we're charity cases. My blood turned cold when I heard those precise figures. They knew too much about my financial situation. Someone had been investigating my finances in great detail. "How do you know so much about my money?" I asked with a trembling voice. Marcus and Linda fell silent, but their faces betrayed them. They had revealed more than intended. I stood from the couch on shaky legs. "I think I have my answer," I said, heading for the door. "Margaret, wait," Marcus called behind me, but I was already leaving the house. That night, I confirmed what I already suspected. My own family viewed me as an obstacle between them and the money they believed they deserved. It wasn't just Daniel and Nicole, it was an entire family conspiracy that had been growing silently for months. The following days were the darkest of my life. I found myself in a situation I never imagined, knowing that my own family planned to murder me, but unable to turn to anyone. Who do you tell that your son wants to kill you? Who would believe such a thing? Besides, I had no concrete evidence, just a conversation I had overheard while hidden in a car. I decided I needed more proof before taking any action. If I was going to fight them, I had to be completely prepared. I began documenting everything, their behavior patterns, their conversations, their visits, anything that could serve as evidence later. I also made a decision that terrified me, but I knew was necessary. I was going to let them believe their plan was working. If I acted suspiciously or confronted Daniel directly, they might change their strategy and become even more dangerous. Instead, I decided to continue playing the role of the naive, trusting mother. 3 days after my confrontation with Marcus, Daniel called to invite me to dinner. His voice sounded especially loving on the phone, which sent chills down my spine knowing what he really thought of me. "Mom, Nicole and I want to take you to that French bistro you enjoy so much," he said in a sweet tone. "We haven't spent time together as a family in a while." The restaurant he mentioned was one we had only visited once more than a year ago, and I hadn't particularly enjoyed it, but I feigned enthusiasm. "How wonderful, son. I love the idea." "Perfect. We'll pick you up Friday at 7. And Mom, wear your favorite blue dress. We want you to look nice." That specific reference to my clothing struck me as odd, but I accepted without questioning. After I hung up, I wondered why he would mention that particular dress. It was one I had purchased 3 years ago, one of the few expensive dresses I had allowed myself to buy in my entire life. Friday evening, I carefully prepared myself. I put on the blue dress as he had requested, styled my hair, and applied light makeup. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I tried to ignore the voice in my head telling me this could be my last dinner. Daniel and Nicole arrived punctually at 7 o'clock. Daniel appeared nervous, though he tried to mask it with forced smiles and superficial comments about the weather. Nicole, however, seemed completely composed, almost cheerful, which I found even more unsettling. During the drive to the restaurant, the conversation was strangely formal. They discussed Daniel's work, some supposed vacation plans, anything except us as a family. I responded automatically, but my mind was entirely focused on observing every detail of their behavior. At the restaurant, Nicole insisted I order the most expensive item on the menu. "Margaret, we're covering everything tonight. Order whatever you want without worrying about the cost," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. During dinner, they began asking seemingly casual questions about my health. How had I been feeling lately? Had I experienced dizziness, problems with stairs? Had I updated my health insurance recently? "Mom, we're concerned about you living alone in that large house," Daniel said in a worried tone. "The staircase is steep. What if you were to fall?" "Oh, son, don't worry. I've lived in that house for 32 years. I know every step perfectly," I replied, trying to sound casual. "But Mom," Nicole insisted, "accidents don't care how long we've lived somewhere. Maybe you should consider moving to a single-level apartment, something safer for a woman your age." The way she said accident sent shivers down my spine. It was as if she was testing the word, hearing how it sounded aloud. And Mom, Daniel continued, have you considered making a will? I know it's uncomfortable to discuss these things, but it's important to have everything organized. There it was, the real reason for this dinner. They wanted to ensure the will was updated before they killed me. Well, I do have a basic will that I created several years ago, I partially lied. I'm leaving everything to you, naturally. I saw Daniel and Nicole exchange a quick look of satisfaction. It was a glance that lasted barely a second, but it was enough to confirm all my suspicions. That's good, Mom. But perhaps you should review it with an attorney. Laws change, and we want to make sure your wishes are executed exactly as you intend, Daniel said in his professional tone. In fact, Nicole added, Daniel could help you with that. Since he's a lawyer, he could ensure everything is perfect. The irony was crushing. My son, who planned to kill me, wanted to be the one to draft the will that would benefit him after my death. After dinner, they insisted on driving me home. During the ride, the conversation became even more sinister. They began discussing what would happen in different hypothetical situations. Mom, if something were to happen to you, Daniel said in a seemingly concerned voice, is there anything specific you would want us to do with your personal belongings? Why are you discussing such morbid things? I asked, feigning annoyance. I plan to live for many more years. Of course, Mom, Nicole quickly said. We just want to be prepared, just in case. It's the responsible thing to do. When we arrived at my house, something unusual happened. Instead of saying goodbye at the door, as they always did, they insisted on escorting me inside. Let us help you with the stairs, Mom. It's dark and you could stumble, Daniel said, taking my arm. As we climbed the steps to my door, I felt their eyes evaluating each step, each railing, every possible point where an accident could occur. It was as if they were conducting reconnaissance of the crime scene. Once inside, Nicole began walking through the house as if she were inspecting it. Margaret, you really should install better lighting on these stairs. They're very dangerous in the dark. And Mom, Daniel added, this carpet at the top of the stairs is somewhat loose. You could easily trip on it. Each comment was another deeper wound to my heart. Not only were they planning to kill me, but they were here in my own home, calculating exactly how to do it. After they left, I remained awake all night, trembling not only with fear, but with a sorrow so profound it caused physical pain. My son had been in my house, had dined with me, had pretended concern for my well-being, all while planning my death. That night, I made the most difficult decision of my life. I couldn't simply wait for them to execute their plan. I couldn't continue living with the constant terror of knowing that every day might be my last. I had to act, but in a way they would never expect. If they wanted me to have an accident, then that's exactly what they were going to get. But it would be an accident that I would completely control. I began planning my own fake death. Planning my own death was the most surreal and terrifying experience of my life. For days, I stayed awake thinking about every detail, every possible failure, all the ways my plan could go wrong. But I knew it was the only way to expose my family and save my own life. First, I needed help, and there was only one person in the world I completely trusted, my neighbor Constance. She was 72 years old, had been a nurse her entire career, and we had been close friends for more than 22 years. If anyone could help me with this impossible plan, it was her. One morning, after ensuring no one was watching me, I went to her house with my heart pounding violently. When she opened the door, she immediately noticed my agitated state. "Margaret, what's wrong? You look awful," she said, inviting me in. We sat in her kitchen where we had shared coffee hundreds of times over the years. But this conversation would be different from all the others. "Constance, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane, but I need you to listen carefully," I began in a trembling voice. I told her everything, from the conversation I had overheard in the car to the sinister dinner, from the confrontation with my brother to the strange visits to my house. Constance listened in silence, but I watched her expression change from surprise to horror and finally to indignation. "My God, Margaret, this is monstrous," she said finally, taking my hands in hers. "Constance, I need your help. I have a plan, but I can't do it alone. I explained my idea to her. I was going to fake my own death in a way so convincing that even the paramedics would believe I had died. Constance, with her medical experience, could help me simulate the vital signs of a deceased person long enough for them to declare me dead and begin procedures. Margaret, do you realize how dangerous this is? If something goes wrong, if I don't do this, I'm going to die for real, I interrupted her. They already have everything planned. It's only a matter of time. Constance closed her eyes, thinking intensely. We would need specific medications. We would have to calculate exact doses, and the timing would have to be perfect. So, will you help me? She looked at me intently for several seconds that felt like hours. Yes, she finally said. But we're going to do it in the safest way possible. Over the following days, Constance and I worked on the details of the plan. She had maintained contacts at the hospital where she had worked for decades and was able to discreetly obtain the medications we needed. We also identified the emergency medical technician who would respond to the call, a young man named Samuel who had recently graduated and wouldn't have enough experience to detect a sophisticated simulation. The plan was complex but feasible. I would take a specific combination of medications that would reduce my vital signs to almost imperceptible levels. Constance would be present to discover my body and call emergency services. When the paramedics arrived, she would help guide the evaluation in a way that would confirm my death without them investigating too thoroughly. After I was declared dead, my body would be taken to the hospital morgue, where a friend of Constance's, a pathologist named Dr. Harrison, had agreed to help us without asking questions. He would falsify the death certificate and allow me to recover in private once the medication effects wore off. Meanwhile, I would remain hidden in a secret room in Constance's basement, watching and recording everything my family did after my supposed death. The most difficult part of the plan was the legal and logistical aspect. We needed to ensure there wouldn't be an autopsy, which meant my death had to appear natural and expected for a woman my age. Constance suggested faking a heart attack, something common and rarely investigated in older people with no history of previous problems. 2 weeks after we started planning, we decided we were ready. We chose a Sunday afternoon when we knew Daniel and Nicole would be at her parents' house for their weekly family lunch. On Sunday morning, I woke feeling strangely calm. After weeks of constant terror, I was finally going to take control of the situation. I dressed carefully in my favorite yellow dress, styled my hair, and even applied a little makeup. If I was going to die, I wanted to look dignified. Constance arrived at 2:00 in the afternoon with a small medical bag. "Are you certain about this, Margaret?" she asked me one final time. Completely certain. I took the medications under her careful supervision. The taste was bitter and unpleasant, but I tried not to think about it. "How long until it takes effect?" I asked. "Between 15 and 20 minutes. You'll feel drowsy first. Then your breathing will become shallow and your pulse will decrease dramatically. It will be like entering a very light coma." The next few minutes were the longest of my life. Constance monitored my vital signs constantly, noting every change in a notebook. Gradually, I began to feel as if I were floating, disconnected from my body. "Margaret, can you hear me?" Constance asked. I wanted to answer, but my voice wouldn't come out. I could hear her perfectly, but it was as if I were paralyzed. It was terrifying and fascinating simultaneously. "Perfect. Your vital signs are exactly where we need them to be. Now, I'm going to call 911. I heard her dial the phone and begin playing the most important role of her life. "Please hurry. I found my neighbor unconscious in her house. I think she's dead. She's not breathing. She doesn't have a pulse. Please hurry." While we waited for the paramedics to arrive, Constance carefully positioned me on the floor of my living room, arranging my body in a natural position for someone who had collapsed from a heart attack. "Everything is going to be fine, Margaret," she whispered in my ear. "In a few hours, this will be over and we'll have all the evidence we need." I heard the sirens approaching and my heart would have started pounding violently if I had had any control over it. This was the moment of truth. If something went wrong with Constance's acting, if the paramedics were more experienced than we expected, if there was some detail we had overlooked, the entire plan would collapse. The paramedics entered my house with their medical equipment, and from my semi-conscious state, I could hear fragments of their evaluation. 64-year-old female, unresponsive. I don't detect a pulse. Respiration is imperceptible. How long has she been like this? I found her a few minutes ago, Constance replied in a broken voice that sounded genuinely distressed. I came to visit, and the door was open. I found her like this on the floor. After several minutes of evaluation, I heard the words I had been both waiting for and dreading. I'm sorry, ma'am. Your friend has passed away. It was likely a heart attack. At this age, it happens very quickly. Officially, Margaret had died. Now began the most difficult part of the plan, observing how my family would react to the news of my death. I awakened in the basement of Constance's house, completely disoriented and with a mouth as dry as sandpaper. The effects of the medications were gradually wearing off, but my body felt heavy and strange. Constance was sitting beside me, monitoring my recovery with the same professional dedication she had shown throughout my death. How do you feel? She asked, helping me sit up slowly. Like I actually died, I replied in a hoarse voice. It worked perfectly. They officially declared you dead. The death certificate is already signed. Officially, Margaret Thompson died yesterday at 3:45 in the afternoon from a sudden heart attack. The reality of what we had done hit me head on. I no longer legally existed. I was a ghost, free to observe how my family would react without them knowing I was watching. Did you call Daniel? I asked, though the question physically pained me. Yes, I called him last night after they took you to the hospital. His reaction was disturbing. Constance showed me the phone where she had recorded the conversation. With trembling hands, I played the audio. Daniel, it's Constance, your mom's neighbor. I have some very sad news. Your mother passed away this afternoon. There was a silence that lasted several seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice didn't sound surprised or devastated. It sounded relieved. Oh my God, what happened? He asked. But there was something forced about his tone of shock. It was a heart attack. I found her in her house. The paramedics said it was very quick, that she didn't suffer. I see. Thank you for calling me, Constance. Nicole and I will go to the hospital immediately to take care of everything. Daniel, I'm so sorry. I know how much you loved your mother. Yes, it's a terrible loss, but my mom had been having some health problems lately. I guess it was her time. That lie about my supposed health problems pierced me like a dagger. He was building a narrative to justify my death before anyone asked uncomfortable questions. After listening to the recording, I couldn't hold back the tears. The coldness in his voice, the ease with which he had accepted the news, the lie about my health, it all confirmed that they had really been planning my death. There's more, Constance said softly. I installed hidden cameras in your house before you died. I wanted to capture their reaction when they went to collect your things. She showed me her laptop where she had access to the cameras in real time. On the screen, I could see my own living room empty and silent. It was strange to see my house from this perspective, knowing it was no longer technically my home. When do you think they'll come? I asked. Probably today. People don't usually wait long to go through the belongings of the deceased, especially when money is involved. We didn't have to wait long. Around noon, we heard the sound of keys in the lock of my house. Daniel, Nicole, Marcus, and Linda entered together like a well-coordinated team. What I saw next tore my soul to pieces. There were no tears, no mourning, not even a respectful pause upon entering the house where I had lived for 32 years. They immediately began evaluating my belongings as if they were appraisers at an auction. Well, finally, Linda said with obvious relief in her voice. I didn't think this day would ever come. Linda, please, Daniel said, but his tone was more cautionary than genuine reproach. We just lost my mom. Oh, Daniel, don't give me the sentimental routine now. We all know this was necessary, Nicole said with a coldness that chilled my blood. Your mother lived her life. Now we can live ours." Marcus was already checking the kitchen cabinets, looking for important documents. "Where do you think she kept the bank papers? We need to find the information for her savings accounts." "Check the desk in her bedroom," Daniel suggested. "She was always very organized with those documents." I watched them scatter through my house like vultures, touching my belongings, evaluating their value, planning how they would divide my inheritance. It was like watching my life being torn apart by people who were supposed to love me. Nicole found my jewelry box and began examining each piece. This gold necklace might be worth something, and these earrings, even though they're old, might have some sentimental value for someone. "Sentimental value isn't going to pay the mortgage," Linda said sarcastically. "You better focus on what's actually worth money." Daniel found my financial documents in the desk drawer exactly where I had always kept them. "Here they are. Savings account at First National Bank, $45,000. Checking account, $15,000. And here's the life insurance policy." "How much is the insurance?" Marcus asked eagerly. $120,000. "Sole beneficiary?" "Me." "Perfect," Nicole said with satisfaction. "With that, plus the savings, plus what we get from selling the house, we'll have enough to buy the new house and pay off all our debts. And we'll get our share, right?" Linda asked in a threatening tone. "Of course," Daniel replied quickly. "As we agreed, a quarter for you both." Listening to my family negotiate the division of my inheritance while my body was supposedly still fresh in the morgue was more painful than I had imagined. But the worst was yet to come. Marcus found a family photo on my nightstand, one of the few pictures where we all appeared together from a Christmas 5 years ago. Instead of showing any emotion upon seeing it, he threw it in the trash without ceremony. "We don't need to keep these sentimental things," he said with disdain. "Marcus is right," Nicole confirmed. "We need to be practical. We're going to sell the house quickly, so we can't clutter ourselves with useless things." But it was Linda who said the words that hurt me the most. Honestly, I'm surprised it took her so long to die. With how stubborn she was, I thought she'd live to be 90 just to spite us. They all laughed. They laughed at me, at my death, at my supposed stubbornness for having lived so long. In that moment, any doubt I might have had about the justice of my plan completely disappeared. Daniel took out his phone and started making calls. "Peterson Real Estate Agency, this is Daniel Thompson. I need you to come appraise a house for a quick sale. Yes, it's urgent. The owner passed away yesterday. We want it on the market this week." They hadn't even planned a dignified funeral. When Nicole asked about the funeral arrangements, Daniel replied, "Simple cremation, no wake, no ceremony. It's cheaper and faster." "And if people ask why there was no wake," Marcus asked, "we'll tell them it was her last wish, that she wanted something simple and private," Daniel replied without hesitation. They were stealing even my dignity in death. There would be no opportunity for my few friends to say goodbye. There would be no recognition of my life of sacrifices. There would be nothing but an anonymous, quick cremation. They spent 3 hours in my house cataloging every valuable object, planning the sale, distributing my belongings as if they were spoils of war. When they finally left, my home had been completely violated. That night, as I watched the recordings over and over again, I made my final decision. It wasn't enough to expose their murder plot. I had to make them pay for every cruel word, for every moment of coldness, for every piece of my life they had destroyed with their greed. "Constance," I said with determination, "I need you to help me with the second part of the plan." "What do you have in mind?" she asked, although from her expression, I could see she already knew it would be something dramatic. "I'm going to rise from the dead at the most humiliating possible moment for all of them. And when I do, I'm going to make sure the whole world knows exactly what kind of people they really are. My family believed they had won the lottery with my death. They had no idea that the real lottery was just beginning, and they had bet on the wrong number." The next few days were an emotional roller coaster that took me from the deepest anger to a steely determination I didn't know I possessed. From my hiding place in Constance's basement, I continued to watch my family's every move through the hidden cameras. documenting every cruel conversation, every heartless decision they made about my supposed inheritance. Constance had installed more discreet cameras in strategic places: Daniel's office, Marcus's house, even in Nicole's car. Her experience as a nurse had taught her to be extremely meticulous, and that attention to detail had transferred perfectly to our surveillance operation. "Margaret, you need to see this," Constance told me on the morning of the third day, pointing to her laptop screen. "Daniel is in his office talking to someone on the phone." In the recording, I could see my son sitting at his desk speaking with a smile that made my stomach turn. "Yes, Mr. Collins, I understand it's a fast process for life insurance when the death is due to natural causes." "Exactly, a heart attack. No, there was no autopsy. The doctor said it was completely normal for a woman her age with her history of stress." "How long for the payout?" 1 week. "Perfect." What impacted me most was his completely casual tone. There was no trace of grief, not even the discomfort one would expect from someone who had just lost their mother. He sounded like a businessman closing a routine deal. After he hung up, he immediately dialed another number. "Nicole, it's me. Good news. The insurance will be processed this week, $120,000 clean. Yes, I already called the real estate agency. They're coming tomorrow to appraise the house." "What?" "No, I haven't had time to think about feelings. We have to be practical." That last phrase shattered my heart. His mother had died just 3 days ago, and he didn't have time for feelings. But what truly prepared me for the final phase of my plan was a conversation we captured that same afternoon between Nicole and Linda at a downtown cafe. "You know what the best part of all this is?" Nicole said, sipping her cappuccino. "That we finally got rid of that burden. Daniel always felt guilty for not visiting her more, for not giving her more money. Now he can live his life without that constant pressure." "Oh, yes," Linda replied enthusiastically. "And the best part is that no one will ever suspect a thing. It was Marcus's perfect plan. An old lady in her 60s dying of a heart attack. Who's going to question that?" "Exactly. And now we all win. You and Daniel can buy your dream house, Marcus can pay off his debts, and I can finally stop pretending I liked that bitter old woman." Hearing Nicole call me a bitter old woman after years of me treating her like a daughter was the final straw. In that moment, any last shred of maternal or familial love that might have remained in my heart completely evaporated. "Constance," I said that night, "you have contacts in the media, don't you?" "A few. Why?" "Because I want my resurrection to be public. I don't want them to find out in private and have time to make excuses or manipulate the situation. I want the whole world to see exactly who they are." Constance smiled for the first time since this nightmare had begun. "I have a friend who works at Channel 9 News, Sylvia Martinez, the investigative reporter. She loves these kinds of stories." "Perfect. When can we meet with her?" The next day, Sophia came to Constance's house at night after making sure no one had followed her. She was a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and that energy that characterizes good journalists. "Mrs. Thompson," she said after we explained the entire situation to her, "this is absolutely incredible. If you have the evidence you say you do, this could be the story of the year." We showed her the video and audio recordings we had compiled over the past few days. I watched her take notes furiously as she listened to my family's conversations, and her expression changed from professional skepticism to genuine outrage. "This is monstrous," she murmured, after watching the recording where Linda suggested they had been waiting for my death for years. "And they plan to have a meeting to officially divide the inheritance," I added. "Yes," I replied. "Daniel once told me that when something happened to any family member, we would have a formal meeting to read the will and distribute the assets. He said it was the civilized thing to do." "When do you think that meeting will be?" she asked. "Probably next Saturday. That's when the whole family is usually available." Sophia closed her notebook and looked me directly in the eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, if we do this, there's no going back. Once it airs, your life and your family's lives will change forever. They already changed forever the day they decided to kill me for money," I replied without hesitation. Now I want the whole world to know what kind of people they really are. Over the next few days, Sophia and her team prepared everything for what they called the most dramatic resurrection in the history of local television. They installed additional cameras in my house, coordinated with the police department to have officers ready to arrest my family for conspiracy, and even contacted a judge to be present during the revelation. The plan was simple, but devastating. My family would gather at my house on Saturday afternoon for the official reading of the will. While they were discussing how to divide my inheritance, I would appear at the front door, accompanied by the television cameras, the police, and all the evidence of their conspiracy. On Friday night, Daniel called all the family members to confirm the meeting. Tomorrow at 3:00 in the afternoon at Mom's house, he told each one. Bring ID because the lawyer will need to verify who the legal heirs are. That lie about the lawyer enraged me. There was no lawyer. They had just invented that excuse to make the meeting seem more official and legal. That night, I could barely sleep, but it wasn't due to nerves. It was due to anticipation. After days of pain, betrayal, and humiliation, I was finally going to get justice. But more than justice, I was going to get something even more satisfying, the complete truth exposed for the whole world to see. Saturday morning, I got ready carefully. I put on the burgundy dress I had bought for Daniel's wedding. I did my makeup as if it were a special occasion and styled my hair impeccably. If I was going to rise from the dead, I wanted to look absolutely radiant. Are you ready for this? Constance asked me as she checked the recording equipment one last time. I've been ready since the moment I heard my son planning my death, I replied with a calm that surprised me. Today, they're going to find out that Margaret Thompson isn't so easy to kill. Sophia arrived with her camera crew at 2:00 in the afternoon. The hidden cameras show they're already arriving at your house, she informed me. Your brother and sister-in-law just got here. Your son and daughter-in-law are parking now. I watched on the screens as my family entered my house for the last time as heirs. They didn't know that in an hour their lives would turn into a public nightmare from which they would never recover. Mrs. Thompson, Sophia said to me, seriously, in a few minutes, you're going to walk through that door and confront the people who plan to kill you. Is there anything specific you want to say to them? I smiled for the first time in weeks. Oh yes, I have a lot to say to them. At 3:15 in the afternoon, as I watched my family through the hidden cameras settling into my own living room to divide my inheritance, I felt a mix of nerves and determination that I had never experienced in my life. It was as if all the years of sacrifice, humiliation, and pain had concentrated into this definitive moment. On the screens, I could see Daniel sitting in my favorite armchair, the same one where I used to read him stories when he was a boy. He had a folder with legal documents in his hands and an expression of satisfaction that made my stomach churn. Nicole was beside him, wearing a new dress that had probably cost more money than I spent on clothes in an entire year. Marcus and Linda occupied the sofa, and I could see the greed in their eyes as they waited to hear the exact figures of my inheritance. Linda had even brought a notebook where she was writing down numbers as if it were a business meeting. Well, Daniel began in a solemn but fake tone, we are here to discuss the distribution of my mother's assets. As you all know, she named me the sole heir in her will. But as a family, we have agreed to make a more equitable distribution. Exactly, Nicole added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sophia touched my shoulder. It's the perfect time, Mrs. Thompson. They're talking about exactly what we expected. I took a deep breath and walked toward the door of my own house, accompanied by 2 camera operators, a sound technician, 2 police officers, and the most tenacious reporter in the city. My heart was pounding so hard I thought the whole neighborhood could hear it. Are you recording? I asked the main camera operator. Yes, ma'am. We're live. Those words gave me the final push of courage I needed. Thousands of people were about to witness the most poetic justice of their lives. I put my key in the lock and turned it slowly. The metallic sound echoed throughout the house, and I immediately heard the conversations in the living room stop. Did you hear that? Linda's nervous voice asked. "It must be the wind," Marcus replied, but his voice sounded uneasy. I opened the door and walked directly into the living room where my family was sitting, discussing how to spend the money from my death. The television cameras followed me, Medina, capturing every second of what was about to become the most dramatic moment of their lives. When I appeared in the doorway of the living room, the silence that followed was absolute and terrifying. Nicole was the first to see me. Her face went completely pale, and she let out a scream that probably echoed throughout the neighborhood. "Oh my God, it can't be!" Daniel got up from the armchair so quickly that he knocked all the documents to the floor. His eyes were so wide I thought they were going to pop out of their sockets. "Mom, but you're dead." Linda started crying hysterically, not with joy at seeing me alive, but clearly with terror. "It's a ghost. It's a ghost. Margaret died. We all saw the death certificate." Marcus remained completely still, as if he had been turned to stone. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. "Hello, my dear family," I said in the calmest voice I could produce. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Sophia entered behind me with her cameras. "Good afternoon. I'm Sophia Martinez from Channel 9 News, and we're broadcasting live what could be the most shocking story of the year." "What's going on here?" Daniel yelled, finally regaining the ability to speak, though his voice sounded completely hysterical. "What's going on, my dear son?" I replied, walking slowly to the center of the room, "is that I have returned from the dead to personally hear how you were planning to divide my inheritance." But the hospital, the death certificate, you were cremated," Nicole stammered, visibly trembling. "Ah, yes, the cremation." I smiled with satisfaction. "How interesting that you mentioned that, Nicole, especially considering that you decided on cremation without a wake because it was cheaper and faster. Isn't that right?" The cameras perfectly captured the look of horror on her face when she realized I knew exactly what they had said. "Mrs. Thompson," Sophia intervened, "could you explain to our audience what led you to fake your own death?" I turned to the cameras, aware that thousands of people were watching this confrontation in real time. I was led to fake my death by discovering that my own family had planned to murder me to collect my inheritance. "That's a lie!" Daniel yelled, but his voice sounded more desperate than outraged. "A lie?" I asked calmly. "Do you mean lies like this?" I took out my phone and played the recording of the conversation I had overheard in his car. His and Nicole's voices filled the room, discussing the details of my planned death. "Are you absolutely certain no one will become suspicious when it happens? The plan is flawless. Mom will have a completely natural, totally believable accident." As the recording continued, I saw my family's faces change from shock to pure terror. Nicole began to cry uncontrollably, but they weren't tears of remorse, but of panic as she realized they had been discovered. "That recording is fake," Linda yelled desperately. "Someone fabricated it. Margaret is crazy." "Fake?" I asked, and took out another phone. "And what about this other conversation, Linda?" "The one you had with Nicole at the cafe yesterday, where you said it was Marcus's perfect plan." I played the second recording, where Linda spoke openly about how they had been waiting for my death for years, and how no one would ever suspect a thing. Marcus finally spoke in a trembling voice. "Margaret, this is a terrible misunderstanding. We would never do something like that." "A misunderstanding?" I laughed bitterly. "Is it also a misunderstanding that you were all here in my house yesterday, dividing my belongings like vultures? Is it a misunderstanding that Daniel had already called the insurance company to collect my life insurance policy?" Sophia turned the microphone directly to Daniel. "Mr. Thompson, how do you explain these recordings where you are clearly heard planning your mother's death?" Daniel was sweating profusely and his hands were trembling. This is a conspiracy. Someone is trying to destroy our family." "A conspiracy?" I interjected. "Like the conspiracy you four made to kill me? Like the conspiracy where you agreed to give Marcus and Linda a quarter of my inheritance in exchange for their complicity?" At that moment, one of the police officers stepped forward. Daniel Thompson, Nicole Stevens, Marcus Thompson, and Linda Wilson. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." "No!" Nicole screamed. "This can't be happening. She's dead. We saw her die." "You didn't see me die," I replied with satisfaction. "You saw me act, and apparently I acted much better than you ever pretended to love me." As the officers began to handcuff my family, Sophia continued with the live interview. "Mrs. Thompson, how does it feel to confront the people who plan to kill you?" "It feels like justice," I replied, looking directly at the cameras. "For 36 years, I sacrificed everything for my son. I worked 16 hours a day, sold my jewelry, gave up my own life to give him the education and opportunities he needed. And this is how he repaid me, by planning my death for money." Daniel, with his hands now cuffed, looked at me with a mixture of hatred and despair. "Mom, please, this is a mistake. I love you. I've always loved you." "You love me?" I asked in a voice that was broken but strong. "Do you love someone you plan to kill for $180,000? Do you love someone whose death you celebrate without even organizing a dignified funeral?" "That's not true." "Silence!" I yelled with a strength I didn't know I had. "I'm not going to listen to any more lies from your mouth. I heard everything, Daniel. I heard how you planned my accident. I heard how you laughed about my death. I heard how Linda said she was surprised it had taken me so long to die. I heard how you divided my money before my body was even cold." The tears finally began to fall from my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation. "Sophia," I said, turning to the reporter, "I want the whole city to know that family isn't always the one you share blood with. Real family is the one that loves you unconditionally, that takes care of you when you're vulnerable, that mourns your death instead of celebrating your inheritance." As the officers led my son, my daughter-in-law, my brother, and my sister-in-law away, Daniel yelled at me from the door, "This isn't over, Mom. We'll fight this in court." "No, Daniel," I replied with a calm that surprised me. "This ended the day you decided your mother was worth less than money. Now you're going to face the consequences of your actions." When the house finally fell silent, Sophia closed the live interview. "This has been one of the most extraordinary stories I have covered in my 20 years of journalism. A mother who faked her death to expose the family that planned to kill her. From here, Sophia Martinez, Channel 9 News." I sank into my favorite armchair, the same one where Daniel had been sitting planning my inheritance just an hour before. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly at peace. Constance came in and sat beside me. "How do you feel?" "Like I've finally woken up from the worst nightmare of my life," I replied, "and as if the real Margaret Thompson just returned from the dead." The months that followed my resurrection were like living in a completely new world. The story went viral within hours, and not just locally. Media outlets all over the country covered what journalists called the most perfect family revenge in modern history. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. TV producers wanted to make documentaries. Writers wanted the book rights, and even a film company contacted me to make a movie. But the most important thing for me was that finally, after decades of silent sacrifice, the whole world knew my story. Social media exploded with messages of support. Thousands of women shared their own stories of maternal sacrifice, of ungrateful families, of children who had abandoned them after receiving everything from them. I became, without wanting to, the voice of all the mothers who had given everything for their families, only to be betrayed in the end. The legal process was faster than expected. The recordings that Constance and I had compiled were irrefutable evidence of the conspiracy. Daniel, Nicole, Marcus, and Linda were formally charged with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, insurance fraud, and planning a homicide for financial gain. During the hearings, their lawyers tried to argue that the recordings had been obtained illegally, but the judge determined that since it was my own house and my own conversations that had been recorded, there was no violation of privacy. In addition, the fact that they had been planning my death justified any means necessary to protect my life. What hurt me the most during the trial was hearing Daniel on the stand trying to justify his actions. His lawyer had built a defense based on the idea that I had been a controlling, manipulative mother who had emotionally blackmailed my son throughout his life. My client felt trapped by the constant demands of a mother who was never satisfied with anything, the lawyer argued. Mrs. Thompson used her sacrifice as an emotional weapon against her son, making him feel guilty for wanting to have his own life. Hearing those lies in a courtroom broke my heart once again. They had turned my unconditional love and my sacrifices into something toxic and manipulative. In their narrative, I was the villain, and they were the victims of my supposed maternal tyranny. But when it was my turn to testify, I had the opportunity to tell my side of the story. In a firm but emotional voice, I narrated every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every extra job I had taken to give Daniel the best life possible. I described how I had sold my wedding ring to buy him his first laptop, how I had worked 16 hours a day to pay for his university, how I had given up my own happiness to ensure his. Your Honor, I said, looking directly at the judge, I never blackmailed my son with my sacrifice. On the contrary, I tried to hide it from him so he wouldn't feel guilty. I wanted him to be free to live his life, to be happy, to start his own family. The only thing I never imagined was that that freedom would mean planning my death. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when the prosecutor played the complete recordings of all the conversations we had captured. Hearing those cold voices again discussing my planned death, this time in a courtroom full of people, was devastating but also liberating. When they played the recording where Linda said she was surprised it had taken me so long to die, I saw several members of the jury wipe tears from their eyes. When they played the part where Nicole referred to me as that burden they had finally gotten rid of, even the judge had to pause to compose himself. Daniel broke down crying during that part of the trial, but I'm not sure if they were tears of genuine remorse or simply terror of the consequences he was facing. The verdicts came back after only 3 hours of jury deliberation, guilty on all charges. Daniel was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Nicole received 17 years, Marcus 14 years, and Linda 12 years for being considered the least active in the planning, but an essential accomplice in the conspiracy. When the judge read the sentences, none of them looked at me. They kept their heads down, finally facing the reality that their actions had real and devastating consequences. After the trial, I approached Daniel one last time before they took him away. "My son," I said softly, "I want you to know that despite everything you've done, there is still a part of me that remembers the sweet boy you used to be." He looked at me with eyes full of tears. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I became." "You became someone who valued money more than his mother's life," I replied sadly. "But maybe these years in prison will give you time to remember who you were before greed consumed you." Those were the last words we exchanged. The following months were about a total reconstruction of my life. I sold the house where I had lived for 32 years. It had too many painful memories, and I couldn't continue living in the place where my family had planned my death. With the money from the sale, I bought a smaller but beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood near Constance's home. I also made a decision that completely changed my perspective on wealth and money. I donated most of my savings to a foundation that helps single mothers fund their children's university education. If my money had been what motivated my family to want to kill me, then I would use that same money to do good in the world. With the income from the rights to my story, I established a scholarship fund that bears my name. Every year, 5 working mothers receive full financial assistance to send their children to university. It's my way of making sure that my experience, however painful it may have been, can create something positive. But the most significant change in my life was the discovery of a new family. Through the letters and messages I received after my story went public, I met dozens of people who had gone through similar experiences. Mothers betrayed by ungrateful children, siblings abandoned by greedy relatives, elderly people exploited by their own kin. We formed a kind of chosen family, a support group that met regularly to share stories, celebrate achievements, and remind each other that true love exists even when it doesn't come from where we expected. One of those people became especially important to me. Isabella, a 60-year-old woman whose daughter had abandoned her in a nursing home after taking all her savings. Isabella and I developed a friendship so deep that she became the sister I had always wanted to have. You know what the most ironic thing about all this is? Isabella said to me one afternoon as we had coffee in my new kitchen. Our biological families betrayed us for money, but we found much better families without money having anything to do with it. She was right. My new life was full of people who loved me for who I was, not for what I had. People who celebrated my achievements without calculating how they could benefit from them. People who, when my real natural death came many years from now, would mourn my passing instead of celebrating my inheritance. 2 years after my resurrection, I received a letter from prison. It was from Daniel. In 4 handwritten pages, he apologized with words that sounded genuine for the first time in years. He told me about the therapy he was receiving in prison, about how he was finally understanding the magnitude of his betrayal, about how he spent his nights remembering all the sacrifices I had made for him. "Mom," he wrote on the last page, "I know I can never undo what I did. I know I deserve to be here, and I know you may never be able to forgive me. But I want you to know that every day I spend in this cell, I remember the incredible woman who raised me, and I hate myself for having been so blind to your love." I read that letter many times over several weeks, debating with myself whether to respond or not. I finally decided to write back, not to forgive him, but to close that chapter of my life definitively. "Daniel," I wrote, "I accept your apology because I believe it's sincere, but forgiveness is something you'll have to earn over many years. Possibly the rest of your life. The boy I raised is buried under the man who planned my death, and only you can decide if he's worth unearthing." I never received a response to that letter, and that's okay. Today, at 67 years old, I can honestly say I am happier than I have been in decades. My house is filled with the laughter of my chosen family. My days are busy with meaningful volunteer work, and my nights are filled with genuine peace. Sometimes people ask me if I regret faking my death, if it wouldn't have been better to confront my family in a less dramatic way. My answer is always the same. They chose to betray me in the most dramatic way possible by planning my murder. I simply chose to defend myself using their own medicine. The most important lesson I learned from this whole experience is that true family is not defined by the blood we share, but by the love we choose to give each other. My biological son betrayed me for money, but I found sisters, daughters, and even grandchildren in the people who came into my life after my resurrection. I also learned that it's never too late to start over. At 64, when most people think their lives are already defined, I had the opportunity to be completely reborn. I didn't just fake my death, I faked my rebirth. And finally, I learned that justice sometimes comes in the most unexpected ways. It wasn't a judge or a jury who really punished my family for their betrayal. It was the truth, publicly exposed, that destroyed them. The money they were willing to kill me for became the cost of the lawyers who couldn't save them. Tonight, as I write these last lines of my story, I look out the window of my new house at a garden I planted with my own hands. The flowers I sowed are blooming beautifully, fed not by the bitterness of the past, but by the hope of the future. My name is Margaret Thompson. I'm 67 years old, and this is the story of how I died to truly live. If there is any mother reading this who feels betrayed by the family she sacrificed everything to create, I want you to know that it is never too late to find the love you truly deserve. Because in the end, true family is not the one that gives us life, but the one that makes it worth living. What did you think about the story, guys? Let's talk in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by subscribing. It means more than you think. If you're looking to listen to more life stories, click one of the videos to watch. I promise you'll love it. Bye.